the Light of Truth radio broadcast with Michael Boldea.
All right, welcome to the program and thank you for joining us. This is the Light of Truth radio broadcast. I am, as always, your humble host, Michael Boldea, and it's good to be with you again, even though we are separated by an ocean still. I am currently still in Romania. Today is, July 31st, the year of our Lord 2025. We're getting closer to our date of departure. The best way I can put it is I have mixed feelings about leaving. I'm looking forward to getting back home, getting back into the swing of things, having my mornings to myself without, traffic, being able to do a little writing more than I have been. But I'm also aware that it's going to be a while until I can come back to Romania. And if the Lord does not see fit to heal my father, it will likely be the last time I see him while here. So yeah, it's really tearing me up. I'm having mixed feelings, but this is the reality of the world we live in. This is the reality of the lives that we've been given. None of us get to get out of life alive. So I've been spending as much time as I can with my dad. The girls have too. They're making some wonderful memories, and it's a good thing. So for those of you that have been asking, when am I going to get back to my regular schedule of posting teachings and whatnot, it will be soon, just not yet. We're set to leave Romania in a few days. We should be home, Lord willing. Once again, everything is contingent upon the will of the Lord. But Lord willing, we should be home around the 7th or 8th of July. So after that, we should get back to some sort of semblance of normalcy. The girls have to start school in a couple of weeks. And so, again, my heart is, it's not divided. It's just aware of the reality of the situation. My dad is doing better than when we first arrived. He's been eating a little better. His face looks a little better. He's moving around, albeit not as sprightly as he used to. But there is progress, and the progress is visible, and I'm holding out hope. God is a God of miracles. We serve a God of miracles. And so for those of you that have been praying for him, that I've been holding him up in prayer, I truly appreciate it, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart. So with that, yes, things are happening. A few weeks back, we did a teaching on Matthew 24 regarding earthquakes in various places. And wouldn't you know it, there was an earthquake in Russia. It was a pretty big one. It was an 8.8 on the Richter scale. And it was right off of the Russian coast. And it even prompted tsunami warnings throughout the land in Southern California as well as the Hawaiian Islands. This was not an earthquake to scoff at. If it would have happened in a populated region, there would have been a lot of casualties. But the earthquake just got the headline. What's been happening here in Romania, even while we've been here, is unprecedented, even when in conversation with people in their 80s and 90s. Not far from here, about 40 kilometers away, there's a village called Hudești. They'd never seen a twister. They'd never seen a tornado. It doesn't happen here. This is not the Midwest. And I know those of you living in Wisconsin are scoffing at the idea of tornadoes being something new and unique. But again, Romania is not a place known for tornadoes, yet a tornado ripped through the village, tore some roofs off, and the back and forth when we visited to bring some supplies and some food and see what we could do to help was that church would likely be very full come Sunday morning because These are things that people have never seen or witnessed with their eyes. They've read about them, they saw them on television if they happen to own a television happening in other areas. But as far as as these things happening in Romania, uh, it's unheard of. This is why it's got, it's gotten people shaken. It's got people um, looking at the times they're living in a whole new light. Because when the Word of God warns of unprecedented natural disasters, I guess that's the best way we can put it, of storms and earthquakes and things that otherwise wouldn't have happened in a certain region. They begin to make the connection even without somebody pointing it out for them. If they've read the Bible, they've understood what the last times are. They kind of correlate the two, and they understand that these are not the times that our parents and grandparents grew up in. Things are happening both in the natural and the supernatural that are unprecedented. They are unique. They are new to certain regions, and people are, waking up and taking note. So that was the ongoing joke with the local pastor. He said, I got to find some more chairs because I'm pretty sure church is going to be packed on Sunday. We were about 10 kilometers away from Boldea the other day, and we had to stop and find refuge underneath some trees because there was a hailstorm. And they have had hailstorms here. They're pretty normal, but the size of the ice rocks or whatever it is that comes down and pings off of your car, that's the one thing they'd never seen before. Some of them got as big as golf balls. We had window cracked. It was just the girls were in the car asking if we were going to be all right. I was certain that we would be, but it was hairy for them. It was something that they hadn't lived through to that extent. I mean, we'd been in a hailstorm in Wisconsin, but it was absolutely nothing compared to this thing. And it wasn't like it was passing. It wasn't like a 2-3 minute thing. It lasted for a good 30 minutes. And to be pelted with golf ball size ice for a good 25-30 minutes while you're sitting in the car because there's nowhere to go, there's nowhere to run, and you're hoping the trees don't suddenly crack and topple over you. The girls got a good feel of what it is to trust the Lord. And these things are happening everywhere. At least in Europe, I haven't been keeping track of what's happening in the States other than what happened in Texas. But I'm sure that any storm that comes about seems to be more aggressive and more violent than any previous storms that we were privy to up to this point. And again, this is not accidental. This isn't something that, it just happens once in a while. This is something that the Word of God warns of repeatedly, something that we should be aware of and understand that, yes, we are living in the last days. Yes, these things will continue to escalate. They will get worse. But as far as the earthquake's concerned, I think it was like the 6th largest earthquake in seismic history. So since they've had seismology, since they've been able to measure how big an earthquake was, this was the 6th largest in seismic history. Now, you may think that it's a coincidence, but a 1-outer may be a coincidence. But when these things begin to happen consistently, then you see a pattern emerging, and you can no longer say, well, it's just coincidental. It's not. These are the things that we've been forewarned of. And so even here in Romania, the brothers and the sisters are beginning to discuss the last days and the end times with a lot more fervor than they had before. Romania was never a prosperous nation after the 1940s. So they've had wars coming through. They've had occupations. They've had hunger. They've had famine. There was even a large earthquake in Bucharest, the capital, back in the 70s. But they're seeing these things happen so frequently. They're seeing unprecedented things taking place in regions where they'd never happened before. There's been flooding throughout the region. A lot of what they hoped would carry them through the winter, as far as potatoes, grains, corn, was utterly decimated. The fruit production this year wasn't very good either because they had a spate of rain that was too much. And so the fruit just, grew bad on the vine, basically. And all of these things are as alarm bells for us. And they're not to scare us, they're not to make us tremble. They're warning signs for us to draw closer to God, to understand the times and the seasons that we're living in, and acknowledge the reality that things are not as they have been, nor will they be as they were. I don't believe there is a return to normalcy, quote unquote. And yes, I just did the finger quotes. Now, because it is a little later in the day here, and I was fully caffeinated by the time 8 a.m. rolled around, I am not enjoying a delicious beverage of any kind. And so I can't tell you it's hot or black because there's nothing here. I have a tepid bottle of water that's next to me, and if I ever need to take a swig, I will let you know. Now, in this area, in Boldea, the weather doesn't get so extreme, but what we've had for the last couple of weeks was extreme heat in the 90s and almost 100 degrees, very humid. And then suddenly, like an on switch going, we turned to rain and hail and colder weather. There was no rest period in between. People were out in T-shirts one day and wearing jackets the next because the weather changed so quickly. These are not things that are accidental. I want to keep pointing this out because it's very important. Now, there are a couple of things that I want to discuss today because they're relevant, I think. We've been discussing the whole Russia-Ukraine situation now for what seems like years, and it has been years. And today, there has been a new press release that sheds light on the entire situation and sort of brings everything into focus. Because if they wanted to sit down to make some sort of agreement, if they wanted to have a ceasefire, they would have had it. And now Volodymyr Zelensky is basically showing all of his cards. And I think this echoes what the gentleman Lindsey Graham has been saying for the longest time. And thankfully, it's not something that this administration is interested in, which is regime change in Russia. Because when we start talking about regime change, then any hope of peace, any hope of a ceasefire, any hope of de-escalating the situation goes out the window. And the one thing nobody can tell me, or anyone that is asking the question, is if you get rid of Vladimir Putin, who is going to replace him? Because I promise you one thing, it's not going to be a puppet of NATO, it's not going to be a puppet of the UN, and it's not going to be a puppet of the West. There are far too many bloodthirsty men that are being kept in check by Vladimir Putin. And once he's removed, once he's out of the picture, they are off the leash. So can somebody guarantee me that the man, quote unquote, chosen to replace Vladimir Putin will be more even-handed, more amenable to peace than Vladimir Putin is? Because if you cannot say that it is a certainty that the guy in charge after Vladimir Putin is taking out will be more peaceful and more amenable to the West, then you've got that problem to solve before you can start talking about regime change. Now, this administration has come out and publicly said, we are not interested in regime change. Yes, we gave the Ukrainians some rockets. I do believe that it was used as leverage to get the Russians to come to the table. But now, with the latest thing that has come from Volodymyr Zelensky, that's dead in the water. So this is the story. We're going to start with this and go on to a couple of other things, because I've been getting so many emails and I've been called out by so many people, because how dare you say that the U.S. is doing any good, or that the Israelis are doing any good, when there's pictures of children that are emaciated being put on the cover of the New York Times. Well, haha, those of you that forwarded me that particular picture, that emaciated child, that child that looks to be starving, is actually a 5-year-old, I believe, that had a pre-existing condition. Starvation had nothing to do with the situation. The child is ill. I'm very sad that the child is ill. But to blame the U.S. and to blame Israel for his illness and say that we were the cause of it because we will not recognize a Palestinian state. And by the way, I know some of you still hate the big orange man. That's perfectly fine. You do as you will. But of all the nations, including Canada, including Germany, including France, the US is still the only one that is not amenable to recognizing Palestine or recognizing a Palestinian state. Pretty much all the others have caved. Even Canada said, yeah, we should recognize a Palestinian state. The US is still the only one that says no. So, for better or worse, take that into account. But first, let's get into what Volodymyr Zelensky said, because it's pertinent. My family lives here. My friends live here. We're about 25, 30 miles from the Ukrainian border. And now that the cards are on the table, now that we understand the reason this has been dragged out for so long, because the one thing Volodymyr Zelensky hopes for is that the US and Western Europe come in, boots on the ground, and depose Vladimir Putin. He understands and he knows that by himself, even with all the weapons that are being given to him by every other country, they cannot win this simply based on the numbers. The Russians have a lot more people than the Ukrainians do. They cannot win this war simply by numbers. Now, let's get into the article because it's pertinent. We begin to understand why this has been dragged out, why certain governments insist that there shouldn't be a ceasefire, that they shouldn't come to the negotiation table, because that is their end goal. The end goal of many nations in Europe is the removal of Vladimir Putin. Nobody can tell me, or you, who's going to replace him. They're hoping they can have someone like they did here in Romania, where the guy that won the election, I guess, didn't really win because the Supreme Court said, no, we won't recognize it. We will not recognize the will of the people. We will not recognize their vote. And the second cycle of the election, the guy that won the first time wasn't even allowed to run. And because Romania is in Europe, the biggest influence on our elections were the French, believe it or not. Senor Macron and his baguettes were the most influential nation when it came to the to the Romanian elections. And the guy that is currently the president is someone that was specifically and purposefully chosen by the French government. Because the guy that won the election fair and square before the Romanian Supreme Court says, no, he didn't, wasn't really friendly to France. He wasn't really friendly to the idea of an ongoing war in Europe for the next 10, 15 years. He was a nationalist. He was a man that was desirous of looking out for the Romanian people first, and the powers that be couldn't have that. So the story is this. Even after the Ukraine war ends, Russia will continue to pose a threat to its neighbors unless the world works to change the regime in Moscow, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said on Thursday morning. I'm sure that it would be on his, make-a-wish for him to be instated as the president of Russia, even though he's Ukrainian. But I don't believe that the Russian people would stand for it. I don't believe that those that are in the circle of power of Moscow and St. Petersburg would allow for any outside influence to determine who the next guy would be. But hey, the saying goes, if wishes were horses, we'd all have stables, wouldn't we? Russia's leadership is mentally stuck in another era. Be that as it may, it's still Russia's leadership, isn't it? I understand that Volodymyr Zelensky thinks himself stronger than he is. I understand that he believes himself to be some sort of genius level politician that should rise through the ranks of international power. But in the end, he's just a former actor who made some bad choices before the people elected him as president. Let's just be frank about this. Again, just if anyone is listening for the first time, I don't believe there's any good guys in this war. I don't believe the Russians are the good guys. I don't believe the Ukrainians are the good guys. I believe that politicians and power-hungry individuals are using the lives of innocent men and women as bargaining chips. I think that is disgusting. I think that is deplorable. And what this man wants currently, which is a new regime in Russia, would lead to a nuclear exchange between Russia and the whole of Europe. Because what would be the point of sitting down for peace talks? What would be the point of trying to hash out some sort of agreement if your stated terms are that those currently in power be removed by some device or another from the power they currently hold? Anyone thinking that Russia's suffering because of the sanctions, you're fooling yourself. Whatever the mass media is telling you, it's a lie. The Russians will always find a place to sell their oil. The Russians will always find a place to sell their gas, whether it's the Chinese or the Indians or the Pakistanis or somebody else. Someone will come along and purchase Russian oil and then sell it to the West for an upcharge, because that's the way things work. That's the way things are. Oil is a limited resource. It's a precious resource. If you have it in your country, then it's valuable and you can monetize the value of what you have in your country, and you will always find a buyer for it. Right now, if it's not going to be the Indians, because I heard that the big orange man wants to sanction or tariff India 25% for buying Russian oil, I'm sure there's a long line of other nations that are willing to purchase Russian gas and Russian oil at a discounted rate and sell it back to the West at a profit. So let's just get that reality crystallized. Because if we think that more sanctions are going to do anything to weaken the Russian power base, we're fooling ourselves. And the fact that Volodymyr Zelensky can't keep his trap shut, because now he's laid his cards on the table, he's told the world what he wants. He wants regime change. This is why he's held out. This is why he's hosting all of these European leaders and all of these senators and Congress people from the US, because his intent is the removal of Vladimir Putin. If that is his intent, then the Russians have no need, no reason to come to the negotiation table, because you still want to oust the people currently in power. And I understand that we've done this for so often with smaller nations. We've played the policeman, we've played the king, where a pawn that is no longer favorable to us gets removed and somebody comes in their place. But you're dealing with the nation that has the most voluminous nuclear stockpile in the world. We're not talking about Libya, where Hillary Clinton had Gaddafi killed. We're not talking about these small nations that have no way of defending themselves, and there's always somebody in the wings wanting the power that that person currently has. Right now, Vladimir Putin has been running Russia for decades. And it's not because he's a nice guy, and it's not because he knows diplomacy. It's because he is ruthless, and it's because he's willing and able to do away with anybody that he deems as opposition, as a political opponent, or as someone that is against him. So anyone that would have taken up the charge to depose Vladimir Putin is either long dead or in some Siberian prison hoping they were dead, wishing they were dead. All right. So you don't have what you have in countries where there's, different factions of one religion that are vying for power. Russia is run by one man, and everyone in his inner circle has proven their fidelity for decades. Even if, in their quiet time, they imagine how it would be to run the thing, they're too afraid of what he would do to them to ever voice that. And I promise you, Europe doesn't have the stomach to do what it takes to depose someone like Vladimir Putin. Zelensky might wish it. He may really dream of it. He may fantasize about it. But you're talking about all-out war. Now, given what we know prophetically, war is an inevitability. It is coming sooner or later. Russia will be a major player. But it doesn't mean we should hasten it. It doesn't mean we should do our best to just get it over with and see ourselves glowing in the dark and eating charcoal pills for breakfast. This is what I don't understand. I'm not masochistic that way. Look, I live every day as though it were my last. I serve God. I love my family. I do what I can to keep a roof over my head and keep them fed. I know what's coming. It has been foretold. The word of God doesn't lie. Every dot and tittle will be fulfilled. But it doesn't mean I have to do everything I can to see that end as soon as possible. Because the end will come when God deems it. The end will come when God says, this is the finish line. Your end is here. Time to pack it in. So I can't be, well, yeah, we should really try to depose Putin so that we can start a world war. No, I got kids. I love watching my girls play. I love watching my girls smile. What was it? Yesterday? The day before yesterday, we went out and passed out food packages and clothing. Victoria and Melina, which are my daughters, they were saving their pennies, and every dollar they made doing extra chores at home for the past 6 months. We went to the store together with their own money. They bought candy and sweets for the kids that we would be seeing. They took all of their toys that they had here in Romania, packed them in a box, and they handed out the toys to other kids. They played with baby chicks. They played with puppies and cats that were on the, properties of those that we visited. I don't want to see that end. If God says, I'll give you 10 more years, then I'll take it. I'm not going to shake my fist at God and go, no, it should have happened yesterday. We should be glowing in the dark already. Where's the mushroom cloud? I don't want to see a mushroom cloud. I know it's coming at some point, but it doesn't mean that I have to desire to see it. When it comes, it will be in God's time. When it comes, I know that my God will be able to protect me and mine. But again, it doesn't mean I should do everything I can in my power to hasten it. So, Volodymyr Zelensky stated that Russia's leadership is mentally stuck in another era and rejects the post-World War II world order. See, now things are beginning to mesh. Things are beginning to become clear. The post-World War II world order, as he calls it. And we're beginning to see the dividing line being drawn. And I don't believe that this administration is part of that mindset. Because if it were, they'd be in lockstep with nations like France and Germany and Canada and go, yep, we need to throw Israel under the bus. We need to have a Palestinian state. Goodbye, good riddance. Let peace and coexisting commence. So no, I do not believe, I'm not there, because I've been getting correspondence from people. Are you ready to admit that the big orange man is as evil and as bad as Kamala Harris would have been? No, I'm not. Because Kamala Harris would have already accepted a Palestinian state. She would have already gone over there and told them that they're being oppressed by the Israelis for so long that it's their right to go and slaughter their children while they're sleeping. So no, I don't. I can't get on board with that. Back to this, and I know I'm going from one thing to another, but I've been reading emails for while I've been here, and every single one is, well, look at what they're doing. They're starving children. Turned out it wasn't a starving child. It was just a sick child. Very sad. But that child would have been sick whether Israel decided to defend itself or not. Look, we are doing all that we can as a nation, and I'm speaking of America, to facilitate humanitarian aid to those living in Gaza. All right, the trucks and the supplies are being hijacked, and the jihadis are living well and being fed while families are starving. But it's not because we stopped the aid, it's because they robbed the aid. So let's just take a step back and understand that sometimes, even if it's effective, propaganda is still propaganda. Because at least 4 emails I got with that same picture of that sick kid. And you know what? Until the story came out that the sick child was sick before and he wasn't really starving, I felt some kind of way about it too. I don't want to see starving kids. It doesn't matter whether they're Palestinian or Iranian or Israeli or Romanian. I've worked most of my life to ensure that kids don't starve. We have an orphanage. We have food distribution. All of this is because I don't want to see starving children. And most people, most rational people, have that same sentiment. It doesn't matter whether they're gypsies. It doesn't matter whether they're Chinese or Egyptian or anything else. Nobody wants to see a starving child. And they know that that kind of propaganda is effective. And it sways people's mindset and it sways people's hearts. And they don't think rationally anymore. They think emotionally. Well, it turned out to be a big old lie. Back in the day when this whole Ukraine-Russia thing started, the thing that caused me to take a step back and go, something's fishy here, is all of the reports that came out of Ukrainian bravery. Remember those, of the ghost of Kiev and all this stuff that turned out to be bupkis, that turned out to be fabrications, that turned out to be lies. And so the one thing that told me is that somebody in the Ukrainian government understands optics and propaganda far better than the Russians do. And so anytime there's a talk of the leaders of the countries coming together and hashing out some sort of peace agreement, you're liable to see a news story. 2 children killed by Russian drones, 2 children killed by Russian soldiers. And once again, they pull back. And right now you're seeing the why of it. You're seeing why there hasn't been any progress on this front. Because the end game for Zelensky and for many European leaders is to do away and replace the current Russian leadership. Because Russia is a thorn in their side. Zelensky's right about it. They will not embrace or accept the post-World War II world order. But you know what? I don't either. Because the world order means a global governance where individual nations no longer have a say. where individual nations can no longer be nationalistic or look out for their own citizens. See, the New World Order, as they like to call it, because now it's become so commonplace a term that nobody even bats an eye about it. When people were talking about it in the late 80s and the 90s, people used to, react to the idea. What do you mean a New World Order? Well, Zelensky came out and said, yeah, the post-World War II world order, where a handful of people decide what the rest of us peons get to do. And we should be happy about what we get to do. What was it that bald guy in Switzerland said? You'll own nothing and be happy about it. Incrementally, we're headed towards that space. We're headed towards that mindset. And nations like Russia and Hungary, and I promise you, somebody is going to start a tiff with Hungary because it's like the last nation in Europe that's unwilling to bend the knee along with Russia. So somebody's going to have an axe to grind with Hungary sooner or later, and you're going to hear about how the prime minister of Hungary also needs to be removed and replaced because he just doesn't see the benefits of the post-World War II New World Order. And even though they can't come out and say it because America is a juggernaut, because America is a superpower, because the current administration doesn't play political games the way they're used to other administrations playing political games, America is also on the short list of nations that will not accept the post-World War II New World Order. Because I promise you, those individuals in the shadows, those that are living in Switzerland, those people that are pulling the strings and making everyone, just absolutely distraught with what's happening in their nations, they don't see America as having a prominent seat at the table either. Because you people, and by you people, I mean Americans, you're just the Clint Eastwood cowboy, give me my gun and leave me alone sort of cat. We can't have that. Right now, you can't even have a sharp knife in England. Some guy got arrested because he was cutting corn with a sharp sickle. In England, he got arrested for having a sickle. Because it's a murder weapon now. I was cutting corn. I wasn't trying to kill anybody. I was just cutting corn. It doesn't matter. They're illegal. And the fact that you people with your God and your Bible and your guns and your freedom aren't willing to see the beauty of the post-World War II New World Order, you're not on the list. But they can't say anything about it. They can't come out and go, yeah, we need to do away with all these rednecks and their barbecue. They refuse. They outright refuse to eat, grasshoppers and maggots for their protein source. They're still butchering cattle and making yummy, yummy ribeye steaks. We can't have that. These people have a vision. And anybody that opposes their vision in their mind deserves to be removed, not from power, but from the planet. And the fact that Volodymyr Zelensky has come out and actually said the quiet part out loud should be a reason for concern for anyone that thought there would be some sort of truce, some sort of peace, something to come out of this whole thing. And the reason he came out with this now is because I think the back channeling was working with the Russians. The Russians saw that the U.S. is not reticent or unwilling to send the Ukrainians weapons. They were using that as leverage for the Russians to come to the negotiation table. And now Zelensky saw that he has no excuse not to do it himself. And so, boom, quiet part out loud. Yeah, it's not going to work. Even if the war ends, we need to change the regime in Moscow. What reason would the Russians now have to come to the negotiation table? What reason would the Russians now have to seek peace? So I do believe that this will escalate because of what Zelensky said. Let that sink in. Let's continue with the article. Russia's leadership is mentally stuck in another era and rejects the post-World War II world order, warned President Zelensky, as he called for regime change against Moscow to remove the threat permanently. Look, you have quite a few million Russians that share the same nationalistic sentiment as their president, Vladimir Putin. So it wouldn't be just removing one man. I'm sorry, it's not going to be that easy, because there's a lot of proud Russians that don't want to bow the knee to the UN, that don't want to be controlled by the fruity pebble that is Mr. Macron. So it's not just going to be removing one guy and then installing somebody that, everyone can stomach. There's millions of Russians that are unwilling to bend the knee. Western Europe might have done it. The Russians, the Hungarians, and a couple of other nations are unwilling to do it. Even here in Romania, where people aren't that willing to go out in the streets and protest and be violent, except, in 89 when they killed Ceausescu and his wife, there is an undertone of resentment towards the West. There's an undertone of resentment towards the big European nations that see them as pawns, to be told what to do, to be told what they could eat, to be told what they could read, to be told whether or not they could go to church. And that resentment is building. And that's just a small microcosm of what is happening in a giant nation like Russia. Because they're seeing what the plan is right now. Zelensky came out and said, we need regime change in Russia. We need somebody that's going to okay UN troops and okay NATO and okay everything, because Russia's a thorn. Addressing an Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe conference remotely by a video link plagued with technical difficulties, when he could be heard, the Ukrainian leader decried fresh overnight airstrikes, of course he did, by Russia, and said Russia keeps launching such attacks even when the whole world is calling on it to stop the war. Now, I know short-term memory is a thing for a lot of us, but when they were really, really close to getting together and hashing things out, wasn't it Mr. Volodymyr Zelensky that blew up a bunch of airplanes with drones in actual Russia? It's amazing to me how coincidental and predictable things have become. Anytime they get close to sitting down, anytime Volodymyr Zelensky sees that he's going to have to actually relent a little bit, boom, fresh airstrikes, either from Ukraine, and Russia responds, or he comes out and says, yeah, even if we end the war, the current regime has to go. I repeat myself because it's necessary. This isn't Libya you're playing with. This is the nation that currently has the largest nuclear stockpile in the world. Russia persists with the war because it doesn't recognize natural borders. What are natural borders, sir? Because a lot of the land that you're fighting over, a lot of the towns that you're fighting over, were formerly Russian territory before Ukraine annexed them. I'm just saying, let's be honest. Again, I don't have a horse in this race. I don't have a dog in this fight. I just want my friends and my family to be safe and live. Because we're really close to Ukraine, and if they start lobbing things that aren't just drones or something that can bring down a building, but that causes mushroom clouds, everyone I know and everyone I love in Romania will be affected. Russia persists with the war because it doesn't recognize natural borders and believes its own borders are wherever it wants them to be, Zelensky said, saying Moscow is stuck in another era. They are mentally stuck in another century, a time of brutal violence, depredations, a total disregard for human rights and equality. Again, the man's an actor. He knows what works. He knows what the narrative needs to be. But take a step back and see that nobody's wearing white in this movie. There's no good guys. We all know that such ideas and such times must never return to Europe. And we all know how to protect ourselves from that, how to protect Europe from what Russia is bringing. Russia can be pushed to stop this war and forced to recognize its real borders, Zelensky continued, stating, if the world doesn't aim to change the regime in Russia, that means even after the war ends, Moscow will still try to destabilize neighboring countries. It will keep spending huge amounts of money, resources, maybe even lives to do so. Allow me to interpret. Russia will always have Russia's best interest at heart. It will not scrape and it will not bend the knee to the New World Order. And so Russia must be isolated, defanged, and the current leadership removed. This is what the man is saying. So any idea that the war will end, it's gone. It's gone. And I've said this before, and I have to say it again, contextually. The Russians, by and large, have shown self-restraint, the likes of which I did not believe they possessed. Because they could lob a few nuclear warheads into Ukraine and this thing would be done. Consequences? Yes, there would be consequences. It all depends who has the stomach to do what. But as far as Ukraine being a player in this production, that would end. They haven't done it. And every time they get a little closer to actually sitting down and talking, a fresh wave of something hits. And now I think there's enough pressure being put on the Ukrainians because I guarantee you the big orange man didn't send them rockets for nothing. Back channeling is what governments do. And there was likely a very explicit request, if not demand, that we'll send you these, but you need to sit down. And this is Zelensky's last move. He understands that if he wants this thing to drag on and hope that Europe engages and removes Putin, he can't sit down at the negotiation table and be seen for what he is. Someone just as vile as the man sitting across the table from him, Vladimir Putin. He still needs to have that aura of the good guy. There are no good guys. European states have to act to protect ourselves from this in the long term. And through sanctions, need to fully block Russia's war machine, cut off its arms industry, limit its energy profits. Russia assets shouldn't just be frozen, Zelensky said, but they should be confiscated outright and turned over. Turned over to whom, Pardonnez-me, as they would say in France. Who should they be turned over to? Let me guess. I only need one guess. You. They should be turned over to you. By the time this thing's done, the world would likely have sent $1 billion per capita dollars US to Ukraine. Every Ukrainian citizen still living could have been a billionaire with all the money that's been shoveled into Ukraine. And all of that money has disappeared because every day we need more. Where did it go? Look, I live close enough to see some of the cars with Ukraine plates driving by. And they're not Honda Accords. They're not Kia Sentras. I've counted more Bentleys with Ukrainian plates than I could number. So, not for nothing, but not everything is quite as it seems. Several children were wounded in Russian missile attacks and drone strikes overnight in Kiev, and 8 people, including a 6-year-old boy, were killed after a large residential building took a direct hit. Per Ukrainian state media, the Ukrainian Air Force shot down 288 Russian drones out of 317 detected, and 3 cruise missiles of 8 launched. The 5 remaining missiles were direct hits, and in some cases, debris from downed drones caused damage on the ground. Ukraine's foreign minister, Andriy Shiba, said the scale of the assault should push U.S. President Donald Trump to give up on giving President Putin 50 days to come to a deal. They're really itching for war, man. They want the West to come in, guns blazing, and do the job for them. I don't believe that's going to happen. I think that what we sent, the last shipment of warheads that we sent, were meant to incentivize both parties to come to the table. And I think, tragically, that is not going to happen now. Because, and for anyone that's going to start, well, it was unintentional. I don't think that's what Zelensky intended. Yes, it's exactly what he intended. It was fully intentional. You don't start talking about regime change without intentionality. All right? You're supposed to be the president of a nation. You don't just off the cuff the idea of regime change, of removing someone that is currently in power that has their finger on the big red trigger. Just saying. So again, certain parties in Europe and abroad are really itching for a war, not realizing what it would mean, not really caring about the fallout, not caring about the collateral damage, not caring about how many would die, because they understand that the ruse that they've been trying to project has come to an end. The average citizen understands that their life isn't better today than it was 5 years ago. They understand that diversity is not their strength, and that they have to walk their children to school and back because there's guys hiding in the bushes that were living in Pakistan and other places just 2 weeks ago that came here and think that their children are prey. I mean, I don't want to get heated, and I don't want to go into detail, but what has happened to the major nations of Europe is a tragedy. And it's a tragedy that could have been avoided and averted if the people in power would have said, this is our nation, come here legally. That's all I'm going to say. No more, no less. Yeah, we're supposed to love people. Yes, I'm more than happy to love them in their own country. Send them food, send them clothing, send them aid. But if they come to your country, the least you can expect of them being allowed into your country is that they don't go on murder sprees of your citizens, that they don't start violating your daughters, that they don't start demanding things to which they have no right. Can we agree on that? I know that sounds very unloving. It's the reality of the world we live in. When Jesus comes and we all get to heaven, it will be perfect. Until then, this is what we have to deal with. So these pie in the sky ideas of, well, if we gave a little and they gave a little, everyone could eat. Stop. Look, there's a big wide chasm between if we would do these things and whether it would work. That's how socialism got its legs. Well, from each according to their ability to each according to their need, and everybody should be happy. Well, joke's on you. Everyone was equally miserable. There was no joy. There was no happiness because the people in power abused their power. They lived better than anyone who had blisters on their hand and who had their chickens and livestock confiscated every year, because that is the nature of the unregenerate heart. If I can get mine, why should I care that you're getting yours? And that's the reality of it. So the whole idea that, well, if everyone gave $1, then the world would be fed. No, because there's going to be somebody that holds up the truck with the food, takes the whole truck and feeds his gang for the next 6 months, and the people are still starving. And then you have people with vile intent that will use any situation and any circumstance to try to shed the darkest possible light on any situation, such as is the case with the New York Times, which had to admit on Tuesday that an emaciated Palestinian child that it featured on the front page of the New York Times saying, "This is what you've done, America." Well, he actually suffered from pre-existing health problems, and that it had presented inaccurately as the result of starvation. And that image got to me. If it was a true story, it's a tragedy and horrendous and shameful. And I'm very sad that the child is sick. But it wasn't because of starvation. He wasn't emaciated because the big evil orange man wasn't sending enough food to Gaza. The child had a pre-existing condition, and every one of you that reposted that picture on Facebook, if you're honest, intellectually speaking, should apologize for reposting propaganda. But none of you are going to do it. So this is where we are. Just take everything with a grain of salt. There is only one absolute truth, and that is Jesus is King. Jesus is Lord, and he is coming back. Everything else is questionable, even if it is a picture. And that's my message for today. So thank you all for listening. I guess we're at 57 minutes. Wow. I'm sorry for going over. I got heated. I apologize. Thank you guys for listening. I'm going to record a program hopefully tomorrow for next week. And then after that, we should be home, Lord willing, and everything will be back to the way it used to be. I can't even sing anymore. All right, Gino, my friend, on you, buddy.
Hey, Mike. So if you go to handyhelp.com, there's a dream called The Bear Awakes that Dimitri Duneman had. I'll just give you the synopsis of it. He saw Russia once weak come back to power and strength ferociously, and that in the dream, there was an attempt to stop this bear and to fend it off, and it devastated everything in its path. And that bear stands for Russia. And at first, people thought the bear was dead, but God allowed it to come back to strength. And Russia is, as Mike said, very well armed nuclear-wise. And goes on in the dream to say that if they seek my face and walk in righteousness before me, I will open their eyes that they may see the danger approach. That means us, the church. If they only look to the approaching danger, they will be caught up and trampled underfoot. Only in righteousness will they find safely. So go to handyhelp.com and check out the dreams and visions of Dimitri Duneman and Mike Boldea. Thank you for listening to The Light of Truth.
Thank you for listening to today's broadcast, The Light of Truth with Michael Boldea. If you would like to order a copy of today's broadcast, please visit our website at handofhelp.com. If you have questions about our ministry, you can email us at handofhelpoffice@aol.com or simply call us at 920-206-9910. God bless you.